Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of our free Master Your Mindset course. So first of all, let's do a little check-in. How did yesterday go? How did you feel about the limiting beliefs? Did you come up with any limiting beliefs? Did you find anything that's been holding you back? Just do a quick little check-in and see how you feel. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about and you're just joining us today, head back over, make sure you do lesson number 1 because each lesson is dependent on the other and we're building from day 1. So stop the bus, go back, get that lesson done, and then join us when you have that one done. But first of all, before we dive into what this lesson is all about today, I want you to give yourself a huge pat on the back. And you should be so proud because this work is really tough. And like I said yesterday, if this was easy, everybody would be doing it. So take a step back, give yourself a big hug or a pat on the back, and just be proud of the fact that you're here, that you're showing up and you're taking responsibility. You should be really proud because that takes a lot of courage. So I commend you for being here. So yesterday we talked about limiting beliefs, and I think we can all agree that they play a huge part in what holds us back, right? We fall in that never-ending cycle and we stay stuck. But the whole reason why you're doing this course is to learn how to get unstuck, how to level up, and how to really negate those limiting beliefs and get in charge of the things that control your everyday life. So today's lesson, and I'm going to geek out on you today. I apologize in advance. And stay to the end, even if you're not into the science piece. I'm not going to get too sciencey on you. But if you're anything like me, when someone says, oh, this is a good thing to do, I don't just automatically jump on board. I have to say I was a little bit of a skeptic with all this. So when I started doing my research and doing my courses and learning all about this stuff about mindset, I decided I need to know the science behind it. So I'm going to share a little bit about the science behind it, but not too much to totally lose you, but just enough for you to go, okay, this stuff is actually real. Okay, so before we dig into managing our mindset and silencing that inner critic, aka your ego, aka your inner mean girl, whatever you want to call it, we really need to know what we're working with here because our brain is a very complex thing. And like anything, understanding and creating awareness is really the key, and it's the first steps to change. So yesterday, our work began with our mindset, and today we're carrying it over even another step further, okay? So the first thing we need to do before we begin the journey of mastering our mindset, we need to get down and talk about what is the ego, okay? And I kind of made a little bit of reference a second ago, but the ego can be referred to as many things, and I will use it interchangeably as I go through this lesson. And some of the words that you might have been kind of accustomed to hearing about is the ego, the inner critic, the mean girl, and this culprit goes by many names. I kind of drop some other words when I talk about the ego sometimes, but most people think that when we talk about the ego, they think of someone having a big ego, right? They're full of themselves, they're egotistical, or somebody who's self-centered. But that is a big no-no. The ego goes way beyond this, okay? And it's actually a part of the brain and is defined as a part of the mind that mediates between the conscious and the unconscious mind. And it's really responsible for reality, our reality and how we show up as we are as people. So it's our identity, essentially, okay? And in clearer terms, in other words, it plays a huge role in our personality, our decision-making, our overthinking, and essentially how we are present in the world today, okay? So when I talk about ego, mean girl, inner critic, that's what I'm talking about. That piece of the brain is actually part of your brain, okay? So now I'm gonna get a little bit sciencey on you, but make sure you watch to the end. I'm not gonna go too in depth, but just enough for you to understand that the brain is very complex and the ego is real, okay? So it goes without saying that if you took, and if I had a picture of the brain right now, there will be many layers to the actual ego, okay? And as previously mentioned, the brain is so complex, okay? And there's actually a lot of science behind it. So scientists claim that the ego is evident in many parts of the brain, and I'll make some reference as we go further. But just so you know that there is this ego who is causing us so much grief that we don't even realize. Because like I said, it's a struggle between your conscious and your unconscious mind, right? So part of the brain that we're going to talk about first is called the ego barrier, right? And it's really your defense mechanism, okay? And this is a tough one because we all can probably relate to what I'm about to talk about. But your defense mechanism is the part of your brain that makes it hard for you to accept your mistakes and your weaknesses, because we all have them, ladies. All of us on this call have a weakness, right? And you must know what I'm talking about. Like if you mess up and you contribute to a problem, but you don't take ownership in that part, and you redirect that to somebody else, right? You say, nope, this is not me, this is all you, and we never take responsibility for our part in it. When you point the finger, when you're stubborn, and when you won't actually self-reflect and admit that you were wrong, that's the ego, okay? Your deepest needs and fears. So the need to be loved, the fear of losing love, the fear of not surviving, the fear of insert the blank, right? They all reside in part of your brain, and it's called the amygdala. You don't really need to remember what this is. I'm just telling you just for informational purposes. But your amygdala is a part of your temporal lobe, okay? And that is responsible for your emotions. Yes, all those emotions that we feel on the run of a day, this is your amygdala, okay? This also makes up part of your ego, and it drives most, if not all, of your actions, okay? So when you're excited, when you're happy, when you're scared, whatever emotion you feel, you name it, it is your ego, okay? And all these areas of your brain are not accessible to your conscious awareness. It's virtually impossible for you to understand what they want and how they control you unless you dig deep, okay? And unless you understand how the brain works and actively work and acknowledging the ego, and then we can improve it, right? Because if we have most of our thoughts in our subconscious mind and we're not working on a deeper level to actually acknowledge that, then these inner thoughts are controlling our life without us even knowing it, okay? But to give a little bit of a deeper explanation of what the ego and the subconscious mind does and the role it plays, I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios, okay? And these scenarios and roles you might be a little bit more familiar with rather than kind of just talking around it. I'm going to give you some specific examples, okay? All right, so here we go. So firstly, the ego oversimplifies and reacts instinctively, okay? So our ego has us responding and reacting on a subconscious level without us even understanding what is happening. And this might look like, okay, if you've ever been in a situation where your loved one does something and you explode, you just kind of react, that's your ego. You don't have no reason why you did it, you just react. Or if you feel this jealous pang in your tummy, or someone is successful in their life and you make it personal about you, or you compare yourself to others. All of those examples are part of the ego. So take a deep breath, let it go, and be gentle on yourself, because your ego is responsible for a lot of the feelings that we have, if not all, okay? This is the other part. So many people find it really hard to work through your ego, and it's because your ego craves praise. And it responds to criticism as an attack, even when the higher level, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but when your higher level of your brain tries to be rational and make you understand that constructive criticism is good for you, your ego makes you defensive, and it makes you create scenarios and stories in your brain, and actually fabricates things and can cause you to have that down spiral negative thought pattern, and you don't even realize it's happening, okay? So you've heard me talk about the subconscious brain as well, and that is part of the ego as well. But your subconscious has to deal with the high level consciousness, and this resides in your neocortex, but once again, you don't need to remember these. And this is where you experience a conscious awareness of decision making, your logic, your reasoning. And this might look like reacting on impulse or doing something that you know doesn't fit your values. So I'm going to give you two scenarios, okay? Let's just say you go to a party, you're working on your health and fitness, there's a giant piece of cake there. You sit down, you dig in, you dive in, and you eat way too much cake. We've all been there, ladies, right? And then as soon as the cake is done, what do? You feel yucky, you feel, did I do that? And that is your struggle, okay? And I'm gonna, I'll wait to share the next example when I get down a little bit further. But the reason why this happens is because you have two parts in your brain. I like to call them your two yous. and they fight to control you. It's almost like Dr. Jekyll, is it Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, right? So even though your higher self is not aware, your lower level, which is your subconscious mind, are constantly in a fight with each other, right? It's almost like good devil, bad devil, or devil, angel, right? They're constantly in a fight with each other. But what happens here is that you have a fight between the two yous. And in the case, the lower level, which is your unconscious mind and your ego, that won over the thoughtful higher level you, okay? The rational you, sometimes I like to call it. And this happens all the time, and your brain feels like it's in overdrive, and it can really lead to disruptive patterns and coping mechanisms, which is why you have so many people who stress eat, who have these impulsive behaviors like drinking, or all the impulsive behaviors. So this is why that happens sometimes, because there's a constant battle between the two inner yous, okay? And it sounds confusing, right? I know, I get it, but I just wanted to give you a little science to back up the validity of the ego and give you an idea of where the ego lives in your brain and how it controls us on a daily basis. So these internal struggles happen all the time, right? And it is complex, right? And I haven't even scratched the surface yet, but you know what? Even though there's so much complexity to all this, the good thing is that you don't need to understand the brain in order to work on this. And the easy way to sum up the ego is that your ego is your association with yourself, right? It's how you think, it's how you feel, it's your beliefs, it's your attitude, your thought patterns, your limiting beliefs, which we talked about yesterday, your strengths, your weaknesses. It is you. It's everything that encompasses you. Okay, I know that's a lot of information coming at you, but the reason why we need to work on this is because if your ego is responsible for all of that, and if our lower level and our subconscious mind is being controlled by negative thoughts, you know how you're going to show up in the world, right? And like I just said, you don't need to know or understand the brain to change. Once you realize, and this is the only thing I need you to get from the ego part, is that your ego can actually serve you, and you can implement tools that actually help and manage that inner mean girl, that ego, the inner critic, whatever you want to call it, once you put the work in. And the results are pretty awesome, okay? So now that we have that out of the way, and when I talk about ego, you know what I mean, and you know that it's a huge part of our brain and how we exist and how we are present. Now we can get started on actually peeling back the layers and see what kind of ego you're working with, okay? And like I mentioned in yesterday's video, we are only scratching the surface, and this is only going to be a very small tidbit of the ego. It's impossible to kind of really dig deep with a short 5-day course like this. But this is a fantastic start. Awareness is first, and then you need to apply, okay? So if you haven't downloaded the homework yet for today, please hop over and print it off. And the purpose of this week's homework is to really observe and be aware of what is happening in the subconscious mind. Yesterday was the start. Today we're really digging in, okay? And once we are able to really identify what your mean girl or what your ego is telling you, okay, and what it's saying, then the strategies and tips and tools we'll be covering over the next couple of days will be way more effective. Because if you don't know what you're looking for or what you're working with, then it's impossible to really do the work and change, okay? Okay? Disclaimer, you might have noticed that while doing this work and challenging your thoughts and challenging your beliefs, your ego has probably sneaked up already. So yesterday, if you were doing your homework, you might have heard some noise happening. Today, when you're learning about the ego, you're going to hear some noise. And what I mean by that is you might hear something in the back of your mind go, this is stupid. I don't have time for this. You know what? I'm really busy right now. I don't really need to be at this. Why did I sign up for this course? Insert excuses here, okay? And remember the work we did yesterday. If that comes up, you need to challenge those thoughts. You need to change the action, and you need to work on that new behavior that's going to help you to level up, right? You're here for a reason. Stick it out. Get uncomfortable. One of my favorite quotes is get comfortable with being uncomfortable and make it work, okay? So if you haven't taken a look at the homework yet today, I'm going to just make a little bit of reference. So I'm going to head over there now, and I'm going to pull it up on my end. So in the homework section, I gave you a little bit of information there just to remind you of what the ego is, so you don't have to keep coming back to the video. And what you're going to do, and it's all explained there, so I won't go into too much depth here, but we are going to record and log our thoughts, okay? So yesterday when you started writing your limiting beliefs, you might have struggled and you might have not been able to really pinpoint your limiting beliefs and to really pinpoint what's going on in your subconscious mind. This activity is going to take you to that next step, okay? It's going to sound silly. It's going to sound like a lot of work, but you're not here for easy. You're here for change, okay? So put the work in and really pinpoint what's going on in your subconscious mind, okay? Because like I said yesterday, we have an average of 60 to 70,000 thoughts in the run of a day. And 90% of those are the same thoughts. So if we are constantly thinking over and over and over negative things and negative beliefs, you better believe we're not going to show up at our best capacity. And we're here to change that, okay? So it was explained in the homework of why we're doing this. And you're going to notice that there is a chart. And I gave you an example. What I want you to do is I want you to, if you have an iPhone or whatever kind of phone you have, take out your phone and set 5 different alarms for yourself. It's going to seem like a lot of work, I get it, but set 5 alarms for yourself to do 5 daily check-ins. And the reason why we're going to do that is because when that alarm goes off, you're going to trigger your brain to actually stop and be present and to be aware of the thoughts that are happening. So I shared an example in the homework section, and I set my first alarm for 7 a.m., which is breakfast time, okay? And then you have 3 categories that you have to fill out. It's your action, your thoughts, and then your feelings associated. Here's what I mean by that. The action was making my smoothie, okay? What was I doing? I was putting the things in the blender, I was looking at the window, and I was waiting for my smoothie to blend, okay? Now, just to put this in perspective, I have a Vitamix, so it probably only takes me 30 to 45 seconds for my smoothie to blend. Then your thoughts that go with it. These are the thoughts that went through my mind while I was making my blender. I wish this could go faster. It was 45 seconds, ladies, okay? I was going to be late for work. I have so much to get done for work today. Man, this smoothie is going to taste gross because my smoothies are power smoothies and they don't taste that good. I feel so uncomfortable in my clothes. Those were some things that were going through my mind. Those were the thoughts within 45 seconds. Now, were any of those empowering thoughts? No, that was my subconscious highlight reel going through my brain without me even knowing it until I forced myself to be aware of those thoughts, okay? The feelings that were associated with that was I was feeling stressed, I was feeling hurried and anxious and sad, okay? Now, disclaimer, when I did this example, this was a couple years ago, okay? So I wanted to share that with you. If I were to share that now and give you an example now, my thought process would be very different because I've done the work and I've put the effort in, okay? So in a matter of 30 to 45 seconds, those were the thoughts that I was thinking and those were the feelings. And if I didn't force myself to really pinpoint what I was thinking and the feelings that I were feeling, I would have never been aware enough to change them. So this is why this exercise is so powerful. It forces you to be self-aware, because just saying be self-aware, that is so elusive, and you need to be taught how to be self-aware. And by setting your alarm, especially if this is brand new to you, it forces you and gives you that little trigger to remind you to do this work, okay? It's gonna seem tedious, I get it, but do the work. Be clear about what's happening in your ego, in your subconscious mind, and then you can do the work. It's pointless for me to give you tips, tools, strategies if you don't know what you're working with, okay? And then I gave you some following situations that can help you. Everything is highlighted there to help you really pinpoint what's happening in that subconscious, in your subconscious mind, and what that inner mean girl, that critic, that ego is doing, and how it's setting you up for either success or for failure, okay? So, wow, I know that was a lot, right? But you're not here for easy, you're here for change. So take a look at the homework again. If you have any questions, go over to my Facebook page and shoot me a message. I'm here to help you. And just remember, the ego will definitely 100% sneak up on you while you're doing this work because your ego doesn't want you to change. Okay? All right, guys. Happy second day. Have a fabulous day, and let's get it done.